Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Show, where our mission is to impact, influence, and inspire other entrepreneurs to follow their dreams and create the future they want and desire. My guest today is an amazing entrepreneur himself, Saeid Kian, the CEO and co-founder of Ribbon. Saeid, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So Saeid, please give our audience a little bit overview about yourself and your background and where the name Saeid Kian is coming from.
Yeah, we have shared heritage, you and I.
Right.
And my story actually links to Ribbon too, so it's appropriate. I'll start from the beginning, and hopefully you'll see how it kind of links together. I'm the first of my family born in the U.S. My whole family is from Iran, and my parents and my older brother, they moved to the U.S. Once the revolution happened in Iran. They moved to Virginia on the East Coast, and I was born there, born in a Persian household, and grew up in Virginia, and went to high school there, went to college, university, etc. And after graduating, I actually started my career off abroad. In a lot of ways, I think itching to kind of see different cultures. I grew up in one culture at home, but then another culture in school, and being an American, getting to be immersed in American culture, and I really wanted to get a little bit more of that. So I started off my career and I moved to Southeast Asia, where I was doing different kinds of consulting work for large development organizations like the World Bank, the ILO, the IFC, etc. And after doing that for a few years, I got really obsessed with the concept of fintech and the concept of mobile money and how different financial systems could help elevate people who were born in lower socioeconomic statuses, who can help the bottom billion, who could help people who've had misfortune in their life. And got introduced to the concept of mobile money more in depth, and got an opportunity to move to Myanmar, where I helped launch a mobile money company. So I did that for a few years. It was super successful, 0 to 1. We launched it, ended up being the primary method of domestic remittance in Myanmar. And after doing that for a few years, moved to Singapore, started working for Facebook. This is back in the days where it was just called Facebook, where we were doing all kinds of things, connectivity initiatives, mobile money initiatives, payments initiatives, and did that for a few years. And then still in Singapore, moved to Stripe. I was working for Stripe, helping them expand into new markets, accept new payment methods. I was really deep into the payments world, and it was, 2020 comes around. My wife and I are in Singapore. My dad, who's been having stomach aches for a few weeks, gives me a call. I just thought it was going to be a normal call where I pick up and chat with him, and we pick up the call, and I won't forget it. He says that the stomach pain is something he had to go to the doctor for. They did some scans, and it came back, and it was stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was the worst case scenario. At that point, it had already spread, and we knew at that point our options were quite limited. And it really hit my wife, me, my family really by surprise. And as you can imagine, I'm really overwhelmed by that. So my wife and I are like, okay, what do we do? We're in Singapore. He's back in Virginia, and he's on the East Coast. We decided, okay, let's go be with family. We moved back in with him. We help him go to chemo. We help him go to radiation. We do last father-son trips together, go visit different places, different parks together, just try to spend quality time. We also do all the logistics, add myself to the account, think about his house. What do we do with that? Cross T's, dot I's, etc. Eventually he goes through hospice. Eventually he passes away. He passes away in my mom's home. And you can imagine we're all sitting there really overwhelmed and shocked by the grief. But at the same time, it was expected, right? Like, he went through hospice. We had a heads up, so I can't say that I was necessarily surprised, as more just shocked by the grief. But then over the next few weeks, something did surprise me, and something that did really overwhelm me was how complicated and hard the logistics of the inheritance came, even though I had spent a ton of time working to make sure that it was going to be easy. And so in some sense, I have been sold this narrative: do the paperwork up front, super easy afterwards, right? Don't do the paperwork, super hard. Do the paperwork, super easy. And yet here I was, totally overwhelmed, surprised, shocked by the fact that just how much in-person, offline time this was taking, how bureaucratic this process was, how much paperwork was having to go through. And it really made me think that something has happened over the past few decades where we've built out these financial systems to be really helpful in terms of getting people to open new accounts, being able to have money digitized. But we've let down that next generation that's grieving and working on getting that, their parents' assets. And we haven't done a good enough job of digitizing that aspect of it. And when I met my co-founder, what we essentially realized as we were talking through myself and my situation and how I was coping with it was it wasn't just me. It was actually 3 million Americans every year who have to go through this. So then we started talking to other folks who are grieving. We started doing a listening tour, and we came to one very simple conclusion, which is the current system right now is a lose-lose, where people who are grieving are losing out because they're spending months, if not years, settling in a state. But then the financial institution themselves, let's say credit union, is also losing out because their potential members, people who could be joining their institution, are A, not just having an awful time, but B, they're taking up a ton of operations time. They have to spend a lot of time on quote unquote deceased accounts. And C, the money just walks out the door. People just take a check, and after weeks of dealing with a case, they close a case and someone takes a check and leaves. So when I met my co-founder, we were like, this is so strange. Everyone is losing out here. The person who's grieving is losing out. The person, the financial institution is losing out because they have a member walk out the door. What does a win-win look like? Is there a world where the person who's grieving has an empathetic and thoughtful experience, and the credit union, for example, could hold and keep and retain those deposits? And that's when we came up with the idea of Ribbon. And Ribbon, at a simple level, is the inheritance platform for credit unions, where we make it easy for people who are grieving to submit everything they need online as a self-serve option, and the credit union can do everything they can to spend as little time as possible on deceased accounts and as much time as possible on trying to do things to encourage people to stay with them.
Right. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And also thanks for being so open and sharing the story about your dad. God bless his soul. So
Thank you. Thank you.
when you came up with the idea, or when you, let's say you found a pain point that was one you had yourself, and then you were like, hey, there is a problem, I somehow have the desire of solving this. How much did you research into finding, okay, what other options are there? I'm not sure if is there anything like Ribbon or similar to Ribbon, or are you guys the only one? So tell me a little bit about that, how it looked like when you came up with the solution but had to do or wanted to do more research first.
Yeah, one good thing about when you start a company based off of your own experience is that the research comes naturally because you have already gone through the pain point. So, for example, because I had already gone through this, what I knew was there were a lot of companies that do the before work, what's called estate administration, right? So, being able to set up your own estate, create your own trust, create your own will. There was a lot of folks who did that kind of work. And then there were some folks who worked on very specific or niche aspects of being able to get consulting services, for example, or those kinds of aspects. But one thing that I just kept seeing didn't exist across the board was no one was offering a online estate solution. For example, a bank or a credit union just didn't give me the ability to send all my documents in one place online so I can get feedback about maybe the death certificate's missing, maybe the letter of administration is missing, maybe a letter of intent is missing, or the ability to do an account opening or account closing form can just be done online. That was never available, except for a few cases, such as, for example, we saw in our research, we looked around, we were trying to see, does any bank offer the ability to do online? We saw folks like Charles Schwab. This is about, a little bit about a year and a half ago now, release their own inheritance center. And they had spent, years working on this. We're not sure how much money, but one can assume an enormous amount of money building out their own inheritance center. And what we realized was there's clearly a need, because folks who have a ton of money, like credit unions or banks that are very, 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 very large, the massive, particularly the mega banks, have the resources to build this out, are building it, but everyone else is not doing it. So we did our own research, of course. We looked to try to see if anyone was there, but I had already gone through this. I was speaking to people who were grieving, and we just kept seeing a common theme, which is this particular aspect of estate settlement is not being offered, and there is a gap in the market.
I see. So, and then what is the first step to do something to, let's say, have a proof of concept when you start with an idea like this, or a project
First,
or a business like this?
yeah, first thing we did was actually just go on a listening tour. So
Mm.
we started asking credit unions, hey, why don't you offer a solution? What is there and what do you care about? We tried to keep it open-ended with our questions. We didn't want to assume anything when we walked in. We just asked things like, what do you care about and what do you see? And then we started asking like more and more specific questions. So we'd ask things like, what do you care about right now? Almost all of them said deposit retention. Um, what do you care about right now? Almost all of them said that they wanted younger members. We would start asking follow-up questions like, do you know how many of your members pass away per year? Almost none of them would have a number at the top of their head. Do you know how much inheritance is being passed from one generation from right now to the next in your institution? Almost none of them would have an answer at the top of their head. So then we started putting together the listening tour into a basic plan of, okay, would you today, we would go to the same credit unions that we're talking to, would you use this? Like, here's a potential solution. Of course, we put in a Figma, designs off of it. We made it really nice. We really wanted them to see based off of what they were describing to us as their pain point as something that was unique. We said, this seems to solve all your problems. You said deposit retention, you said younger members, you said member experience, you said less time per deceased account, you told us all these things. We think that this solves it. Would you use this or buy this today? And then at some point, based off of a few iteration cycles, we started getting, oh, is that available? Is that available right now? And then once we started getting, responses like that, we knew we're on to something and that this is something serious.
Mhm. So, and then at some point, at what point do you guys go and basically do the do the sale and ask for money to, okay, do you want it? Yeah, I might be interested. Okay, let's take your credit card out and pay for it. That's how you usually get like 100% proof of concept. So at what point did you guys do that?
Yeah, so this is much more art than science. You always have to feel out the conversation. You have to feel out the comfort levels. The other thing I'll say, which is an important framework for all of this, is there are early adopters in the market, and early adopters are always more likely to give that feedback, to feel comfortable with like the fact that you're early on. And then you can also be more open with the early adopters and say like, hey, I am early on. Just letting you
Mhm.
know, like we're an early company. We've raised the pre-seed. We've raised a round. We're not that many employees, and especially in your early days, you have zero customers. Hey, we have zero customers. We're looking for our first one. Once you have that conversation, then the question is, okay, at what point do you say, here is the contract? And for us, it was throughout the process. At the moment they said, yes, this is interesting, we started treating it like, okay, let's be serious about this. We're not giving away anything for free. We think that there's value, you would want to pay for it. So we started, the moment we showed them design and they said, oh, actually, is that available? Then we
Mhm.
turned it into your typical B2B sales process where we said, yes, this is available. Here's what we're thinking is makes sense in terms of a product. Here's what we think it makes sense in terms of how you use it. Here's what we think it makes sense in terms of pricing and your MSA structure. What do you think? Obviously, we're not telling them that this is the only way. We're leaving the door open for discussion and back and forth, and then we would move it through the sales cycle that way. And we found that approach to be very successful.
Right. And then would you guys go back and forth and stay in touch with them as you develop the product to get their feedbacks and, round for round, see if that is accurate with their demand?
Almost always. I think sometimes, though, what we had to learn was they also want us to do a lot of the thinking. So, in our case, for example, there was zero times where people would just walk through an entire screen and say, I want this here, I want that there, I want this here. That would never happen.
Mhm.
Instead, it was, my problem is X. I spend a ton of time per deceased account, or I have to review power of attorney documents, right? Or sometimes they email me and sometimes they call me, and that's kind of, or a lot of people want to come in branch, and I just want to be able to do it for them in branch. Like we would get these kinds of comments. We would then flesh out, and we would try to bring it to them as complete as possible, and say, hey, this looks like something that could be useful based off of your comments. What do you think? And we wanted them to not feel like this would be a ton of their effort and time, hours every week for them to do product building for us. So there was this middle ground we were trying to play. We want to be able to show them the product, get their feedback, but at the same time recognize they're not going to go through screen by screen, button by button. And we found that middle ground was really helpful. Treat it like, we're the folks who are trying to be like, helping you based off of your feedback. Let's bring it back. And on average, I would say we probably did 2 to 3 sessions, more like probably closer to 3 sessions per credit union that we've talked with in terms of feedback on the product cycle. We tried not to do more than 3 because at some point they would say like, okay, if we're doing more than 3 meetings, you're just still too early. You still haven't figured it out yet. And, like I'm looking for some, even early adopter, like I need you to have this a little bit more figured out. So we would just at the third mark, we would hopefully come up with something that was ready to go today. And normally when we set that internal benchmark, okay, 3 meetings max, have it completely ready by meeting 3, then we found out like, oh, we're able to give them something that they're really happy with.
And do you guys always market B2B to credit unions or also market B2C to end users that think about their future and planning and whatsoever?
Right now, I mean, we're still an early company, so right now we're focused on B2B. And right now
Okay.
we're focused on credit unions, and then as you can imagine, we can expand from there to community banks, regional banks, etc. But for now, what we're seeing is end users don't need to know about us. And every time we do a focus group discussion or anytime we talk to someone who's lost someone, pretty much every time they say the same thing, which is, I don't care who's helping me. I don't care what the brand is. I just want to not go in person. I want a self-serve option to be able to do this. Most of the time you can imagine they have kids and they have a full-time job. So we realized, okay, the actual potential here is with the business layer. So we're going to start B2B, and just take it from there.
Okay. And could it also be an option that you guys go to B2B, but let's say the financial institutions, they marketed then B2C to their clients and customers?
Definitely, definitely, definitely. This is something that they should brag about, to be able to say we offer full estate self-serve options is, I think, something that they can and should do and what we encourage them to do. Um, it just makes sense to differentiate yourself from others by saying, hey, you should know that if you pass away, your spouse is going to have, maximum 2 days dealing with us versus 6 months with someone else. Because when people plan and make decisions, they're gonna take that into account. They're gonna know that, right? Like for example, I'm married. I do not want to put my money with an institution that would give my wife a nightmare if I were to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is we want to be the B2B layer. We want them to go and use this as a differentiator in the market to say we offer estate solutions and we also make it really easy for people who are grieving. And we think that will be we think that'll really help them acquire new members.
I see. Is that so? When I listened to your story in the beginning, you mentioned about the companies, all these huge companies that you have worked for, such as Stripe and Meta or Facebook at that time, and so on. Is this your first journey as an entrepreneur, or have you done other projects on your own as an entrepreneur, as a starter,
Yeah,
beginner?
this is my first journey as an entrepreneur, as CEO.
Right.
So it's the first time where I'm leading it and doing it from 0 to 1, raising a pre-seed. It goes from idea to something else. This is the other time I've worked from a 0 to 1 as part of the initial launch team was in Myanmar, where we did a mobile money company. That taught me an enormous amount. The team there was fantastic. The CEOs, they're fantastic. And I learned a lot from that experience. So in a lot of ways, I would say just being introduced to the startup mentality and the entrepreneur mindset early on was very helpful. But as you can imagine, and as you very well know, it's very different than just do it yourself, and that's what I've been learning over the past 2 years.
What is different this time? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you want to know when you're actually starting it from scratch and you're building it, you can imagine the journey can feel very lonely. So it's so different to be the one that it all falls on your shoulders at the end of the day, and some degree you just have to accept and take that burden on. The other thing which I just kind of related to the loneliness journey is just the ups and downs of it. I think compared to pretty much every job I've had before, whether it was consulting a big company or working in a startup, um, there was always ups and downs, but the level of variance and how high the highs are and how lows the lows are is so much different when you feel like it directly impacts your life and impacts your potential future. And the thing that kind of surprised me was I always thought that the highs and the highs and the lows and the lows would be related to the potential of money of like, if this does really well, then I'll have a lot of money. But actually what I realized, it's reputation. You feel embarrassed if it's not going well, or you feel pride if it is going well. And I think the thing that I didn't expect and the thing that I had learned and what makes it so different is it really feels like your reputation's on the line and you don't want to disappoint other people because of that. I always thought it was going to be more about the money, and it's not about the money. It's not about my personal net worth. It's about wanting to make particularly people I respect and admire and love. I want to make them feel proud of me, and that has been something that was really feels very different when you're doing it yourself and you're starting it from the beginning.
100%. That's a beautiful why or a reason behind and motivation behind something to do. So yeah. So how do you how are you guys funded? How did you fund Ribbon?
We started off the first month or 2 months. We were making this decision: do we, bootstrap it? Do we go the VC route? We ultimately decided, my co-founder and I, the best thing to do would be to go do a VC route. We went, and this was not so long after the market crash in 2022 of we were thinking about like Silicon Valley Bank and all that. We were like, okay, what do we do? How does this work? Should we go out and raise money? We figured, sure, let's do it. We can go out, we can talk to folks. Worst case, doesn't happen. We ultimately decided to go the VC route. And the reason we did that was when we went out and started talking to folks, we realized there are actually really good investors out in the market who are very helpful. And being able to get that capital to take a bet and be able to meaningfully invest in a solution that's good enough would be worth it. So we raised $2.7 million in our pre-seed. We were so proud of this because the market, was and is really hard as compared to a few years ago to be able to raise that pre-seed. So when we raised that 2.7 million, we did it to be able to say, okay, this is going to be money that we can allocate to building a team, taking it seriously, being able to provide an MVP that is good enough. I think sometimes people think the MVP has to be like unusable, but for us, we really wanted the M to be we wanted the M and MVP to be at the bar of financial institutions, which is higher than the consumer bar. So the MVP for B2B oftentimes, well, I should say for financial institutions is a little bit higher. And so we went the VC route, we raised money, and we've so far been really happy with that choice.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you raise money, like the actual process for someone who is interested in learning that but has never done it before?
Yes, ton of lessons here. The first thing we did was, and this is the best choice I think we've made, is talk to folks that come through your network and come through people you already know, because you can have more honest conversations that way. And particularly when it comes through a network, you're going to be able to get better feedback. The second thing we learned was I think there's an instinct to want to go into sales mode when you're pitching to a VC. But what we realized is that honesty and just being vulnerable and saying like, this is what we have, this is what we think is going to work, but we totally understand it might not. So here are potential backup options, worked better as a mechanism for having good conversations and being able to close around. And what we did was go through our network, find folks who came through referrals, reach out through our network to ask for anyone who can introduce us to high quality investors. And that's something that really paid off a ton of dividends. And once we did those two things, we put together a deck. We tried to be honest and vulnerable in our deck, saying, here's what we think the huge upside is. Here's a personal story. Here's what we think matters. Here's where we think could be tricky, could be tough, etc. And when we did that, we found that on average, when you're a pre-seed, they're not looking to do, dive deep into your balance sheet and your P&Ls, because there is no balance sheet, right?
Mm.
It's just, at the end of the day, it's just two people. They're looking at two people and they're saying, is this two people, are they going to build a company or not going to build a company? Are they going to give up the first time, like they get a door slammed in their face, or they're not going to give up? And once we figured that out, we were able to go talk to a lot of investors. That's the other thing I would say is we did a lot of at bats. We're not afraid of doing at bats. We're not afraid of the no's. So we did a ton of at bats. I mean, we must talk to like 50 plus investors in a given 4-week span. By the end of that period, we learned a lot about what the communication is like, what's the back and forth like, and from there we were able to get term sheets and close a round that was well oversubscribed at that point. That made sense for us.
Very interesting. And how long did it take you guys to raise 2.7 million?
Beginning to end probably took us 10 weeks.
Oh, wow. That's super fast.
Yeah, so it was 10 weeks, maybe up to 12. I'd have to look at the calendar again. It's funny, your reaction is probably the correct one of super fast, but at the same time, when you're going through it, every day feels like the longest day of your life. So yes, it was probably, when you look at the data, on the fast side, but two things made it feel very slow. One is you're looking at your email, wondering when you're going to get that response. And there's nothing that makes time go slower than refreshing an inbox. The second thing is we had come from an environment where a lot of our peers and entrepreneurs had come from a different fundraising context, where the expectation for us was like the 2020, 2019, where you say an idea out loud and you open your inbox and there's 12 term sheets the next day, right? Like everyone kind of gave us that narrative, which is the final thing I'll say about that, which is it's kind of not useful to compare yourself to other entrepreneurs without knowing the full context. So for us, it was 10 weeks is very fast in the current context. In the 2020, 2019 world, it could have been a lot slower, right? Some folks who would close around in 4 or 5 days. Or, for example, if you're an entrepreneur right now in the AI world, you probably have heard enough stories of someone closing around in 3 to 4 days, right? Don't even worry about it. Like, don't even stress about it. That's like, you're comparing yourself to the wrong thing. The race is only with you. And at the end of the day, 10 weeks felt painful, but looking back on it, I think that it was very fast, and it was a testament to us being able to put together a tight script and not take the no's personally. Like, if we got a no, we didn't take it personally. We just kept going to the next one, keep knocking on the next door until we got some good responses.
And what do you think was the most important decision-making factor for the investors to give you the money? Because, as you said, there was no P&L, there was no anything physically that they could touch, right? They had to trust you, and yeah. So what was the most important thing?
I think they looked at co-founder duo that had both technical competence and product competence. They looked at someone that had personal experience with the problem. They saw that they were going after a market that was large, and with enough conversations, they saw that these are two people who are not going to give up. So when you combine those things, you say, I have a co-founder duo that, someone can build it, someone can sell it. They're going after a market that seems large. So even if the first iteration isn't right, maybe the next few will be right. You have personal experience with it. So obviously, this, you're not just like saying like, oh, I'm going to go work on, let's say if I start a company on AI medical imaging, you'd be like, Saeid, you're not a doctor, you were terrible in biology. Like, why are you doing this, right? So, that would be weird, but I have personal experience with this, so it makes sense. And then, at the end, you also look at this person and you see, like, do they have grit? Are they going to give up? Are they like, do I feel like if they got a no, would they take it personally and just say, well, it's not worth it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or they're going to say, okay, no worries, let's go to the next one. And I think once we were able to do that, that mattered more than anything else in terms of like business case or any of the other justifications.
And I believe VCs or investors in general, let's say experienced investors in general, have a pretty good sense of feeling and experience for this, because they get to talk to a lot of founders and entrepreneurs. So I would say they know how to, number one, ask the right questions to find out more about someone. As you say, are they going to give up with the first no, or are they going to keep pushing through or not? Yeah, I believe that's something
Yes.
that they are very experienced in.
Big time. Pattern recognition, especially the great VCs are just fantastic at pattern recognition. They're really good
Mhm.
at it. That being said, again, if you get a no, you can't take it personally because you don't know the context of that VC. They may have a fund that only has two shots left, and
Mhm.
they have if they have two shots left, they may have already given three shots to something similar to your idea 1 year ago, and they might love you and they might love your idea, but they've already given three shots to someone that's kind of similar a year ago, and they only have two shots left, and they'd rather put it somewhere else right now. Like, you don't know the context. So I would say VCs are very good at pattern recognition, but even sometimes they might look at you and say like, I think you fit my pattern recognition of being a great entrepreneur, but I still have to pass, and you can't take it personally because you don't really know what their incentives are, right?
Mhm.
They might, again, they might have a fund that's closing and they don't have more than one shot left, and they want to put that one shot somewhere else in a totally different vertical, totally different market. They might look at me and say, Saeed, you're in the great wealth transfer. I have two bets in the great wealth transfer. I have no bets in AI. I got to make a bet in AI. Like, I'm just gonna have to pass on this one. So that's another thing that I always thought was important is at some point we just learned to not take no's personally.
Right, right. And I wonder, how do you and your co-founder complete one another
Oh,
in
it's in
terms
so
of
many ways.
skills and experience and everything?
Yes, and
Personality.
personality especially. My co-founder is one of the biggest blessings I think I've ever had in my life. He's a phenomenal person. If I were to say like one thing that matters the most in terms of why we've been able to get momentum so far, is we've had a good co-founder relationship. He lives very close to me, lives about 20 minutes away. We spend personal time together. We spend our birthdays together, etc. We have a very close relationship. Um, there's some obvious ways we complement each other. He's a technical software engineer. I'm working
Mm.
more on sales, right, and business development and product and legal. So that's kind of the classic way a co-founder pair complements each other. But there are other ways too, right? I would say he has a way of being really emotionally intelligent. And then I tried to be like strictly logical. A is B. If A and then not B, then maybe C, right? And being
Mhm.
able to have those two together, I think, can have really productive conversations about what a product should be, what a BD strategy should be. Um, and I think that's really, really important. And then the things that we share in common might be as important, which is we both just really believe in kindness as a principle.
Mhm.
So if you're going to hire someone, if you're going to work with a team, if you're going to talk to a BD partner, if you're going to talk to someone else as a third party as a potential partner, just approach with kindness. Um, life is short, as I've come to realize, and the last thing we want is to be on our deathbed thinking that we were trying to approach life without kindness. So having that has been a really helpful principle. The other thing that I think is incredible about him, which both of us have similar background in, is he's an immigrant, right? He came to the U.S. at age 8 from Kenya.
Mhm.
So he came to the U.S. Early enough in life where both him and I are like, yeah, we're Americans. That's who we are.
Mhm.
But also late enough to remember all the sacrifices his parents made, and he regularly talks about that. He regularly brings it up. His dad's a police officer. His mom works as healthcare, and he often talks about how if you want to make entrepreneurship work, you got to take a risk. It's worth it. You gotta, America is the place where you build a dream. That's something I really believe in as well. America is a place where you build a dream. This is the time to take a risk. And I think the fact that we both have that immigrant background has
Mhm.
been really helpful for us in terms of, if nothing else, being able to take the days that are really low and being able to say like, okay, next point, next day.
Mhm. Mhm. So, Said, how much do you believe that immigrant entrepreneur seed was implanted in you or to you by your parents, and by seeing, that they had to leave Iran and come to the US and do whatever they did? And you had some, let's call it, driving force in you that saw they had to grow, they had to go through something difficult also in order for you to be born in an amazing place like America.
It's if not the most important thing that's driving me, it's one of the most important things, right? I mean, um, I think 100% of my entrepreneurial drive comes from seeing my parents and my family and my background, right?
Mm,
And I think is it also made me realize that entrepreneurship is not being in San Francisco and doing a tech startup and raising VC, right? Like entrepreneurship, like my dad was an Uber and Lyft driver, right? And he was a cab driver. Um, that is to me as much entrepreneurship as anything else. Like it is the ability to say, I need to solve for a problem. I need to be able to use that problem to create a solution. And I need to be able to collect money from that solution that I'm providing. And if the market is not going to pay me for it, then it's not working out. And to be able to absolutely grind for it. And when you grow up in an environment where your parents left everything behind, for all intents and purposes, they left their country behind. They felt like their entire country had left them. They felt like, what do I have left? I'm in the U.S. and I had all this stuff and all these dreams and all these hopes and they're all gone. But at least I can come to the U.S. and try my hardest there. And when you see that in person, you see them going through it and trying, learning a new language, going to community college, picking up new skills. My mom going, working fast food when she first came to the US and then did night shifts to be able to go to community college so she can become an accountant. That gave me this understanding that
mm,
the cards can be stacked against you,
mm,
but that means nothing compared to effort and that means nothing compared to grit. And the last thing I'll say is it also makes you believe that, you know, I have an obligation to try just as hard because otherwise I'm letting them down.
mm,
And I think that's like the thing that Alan and my co-founder and I always talk about is we have an obligation to try hard. When you see people you love and care sacrifice so much for you, you go, I'm in this amazing country. I have the ability to start my dreams. I literally just, type in a few words and I have a C corp created in Delaware. The bar, like the friction is quite low compared to what they had to go through. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do here.
mm. That's beautiful, man. It somehow touched me when I was listening to you. I don't know why, but yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that. And I also believe, when you see your parents going through what they do as immigrants or even other immigrants, then you also get to see, hey, if they went through all of this and they survived and they ended up where they are, then anything can be done, right? And
100%.
that is so powerful if one can take this and use it as a driving force, then I truly believe anything can be done.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so powerful. It's honestly, it's a little scary too. It's powerful, it's scary, but you realize you can do anything, like you
Hmm.
can start a company and decide that you want to build satellites and send satellites up into the sky if you want to do that. If you wanted to do that, it's not impossible, really. You could start to say, okay, how do you make a satellite? Who creates satellites right now? Who do I talk to about what permits I need? You just start going through and asking questions. The thing that I think is missing is, are you willing to go through the sacrifice? Are you willing to go through the no's? Are you willing to go through kind of the humiliation of the ups and downs of it? And if you're willing to say, like, especially when you have clear examples of your life where people you love have gone through that, you're more likely to do it yourself. So watching my parents go through, they felt humiliated having to work these jobs when they came to the U.S. And I saw them do that and then be able to make a great life for themselves. I said, well, I can do that too, right? I mean, I can. It's a lot easier for me actually. And now we have this like real ability to say, okay, actually, anything can be done. And if anything can be done, then like when you get that no, when someone calls you and says, "Yeah, sorry, I'm not interested," or someone says, "Look, I'm not going to invest in that. It's a stupid idea." You don't take it personally. You go, "Okay, I just got to find a different path to get there."
That's awesome, man. Saeed, how big is your team right now, outside of you and your co-founder?
Yeah, well, I should say we're a total of 6 people, so four in addition to us and the co-founder. We're a big believer in the new mantra of today, which is I think it was Sam Altman who said that probably in the next decade we'll see the first billion-dollar company with just one person, thanks to AI
Mm,
and tools. We're a big believer in that a company's success is not measured in number of employees, it's measured, and the magnitude and the scope of the problem that they're solving, and whether or not their solution makes people's lives better. So we're a small, mighty team of 6. I think we would like to continue to stay a nimble and fast-moving team, and then grow as necessary, only if it attacks the problem as worthy.
I see. So, what is it that, when somebody is listening to this and they're like, yeah, it sounds very interesting, and I want to find out more about what you guys do and more about Ribbon, where can they find you, and maybe follow your journey if there is something that you share on public?
Yeah, we so first thing you do is go to our website, www.trustribbon.com. The second thing is, follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Twitter, or X, I should say. So Trust Ribbon handle. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Saeid Kian. Same thing on LinkedIn. We're quite active, I would say, on LinkedIn the most, with being able to give updates, sending folks about new features, new products, new partnerships, etc. And that's the best place to find us.
Awesome. And is there any advice that you have for someone who just listened to this conversation and is super pumped and inspired by what you do and wants to go out there and make their dream come true? What is your advice for them?
Some combination of do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. So follow the Nike mantra of just do it. I think the biggest things between you and your entrepreneurship dreams is whether or not you'll go out and actually try. Trying doesn't mean Googling. Trying doesn't mean like research. Trying means literally go and see whether or not someone wants the product or the solution. Pick up the phone call. Try to do the sale. If they say no, try to ask why. I'll also add on to that a final piece of advice, which is came from Roger Federer's commencement speech, which I think like spoke so deeply to me and to so many people that I know. Which, when he was saying, like, most people I know, when he was talking to the commencement crowd, he was saying most people I know know that I've won like 80% of my matches. Few people know that I've only won 54% of the points in my entire career, which is another way of saying essentially every single point was a coin flip. Every single point about whether it was him or the other person who's playing was going to be a coin flip. And what he realized was it doesn't matter if you just scored the most incredible point and you feel so proud about it, or if you just humiliated yourself, you missed an easy backhand right back, you totally missed it and blew it. The most important thing is just go to the next point. Whatever has happened, take it in, take a deep breath, move to the next point, and forget about it. That has been that mantra of go to the next point, next point, next point. Just remember is probably the most important thing that's been helping our company succeed so far.
That's awesome, man. This has been such a heartwarming conversation and a very interesting conversation, Said. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. And I'm really glad I told you before we hit record, as I'm preparing for the second hurricane to hit in less than 2 days. I'm really glad I did this interview with you, and we're going to release it this week. And yeah, man, all the best to you. So much success and luck that I wish you. And thanks for taking the time and coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast to be here. Please stay dry, stay safe, and yeah, we'll hopefully talk again soon.
Thank you so much.